Title: The Abandoned Asylum. The old Blackwood Asylum had been abandoned for decades, sitting on the outskirts of town like a scar that refused to fade. Locals whispered stories about it, patients who vanished, doctors who conducted twisted experiments, and the screams that echoed long after the doors were locked for good. But they were just stories. Or so I thought, until I went inside. It started as a dare. My friends and I were always chasing thrills, and breaking into the asylum seemed like the ultimate test of courage. Armed with flashlights, a camera, and false bravado, we slipped through a gap in the rusted fence under the cover of night. The building loomed before us, a monolith of decaying brick and shattered windows. The front doors hung crooked on their hinges, creaking with every gust of wind. We hesitated for a moment, exchanging nervous glances, then pushed forward. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Graffiti covered the walls, mingling with peeling paint and faded warnings from another era. Our footsteps echoed down the dark hallways, a fragile sound against the oppressive silence. That's when the first door slammed shut behind us. We spun around, hearts racing. No one was there. "Probably just the wind," Jake muttered, forcing a laugh. But there was no wind inside. We pressed on, our flashlights casting long, trembling shadows. The deeper we went, the colder it became. The temperature drop was sudden, unnatural. Our breath came out in visible puffs, despite it being a mild autumn night outside. We reached the main hall, where rusted gurneys and broken wheelchairs lay scattered like the aftermath of a forgotten tragedy. That's when we heard a faint whisper, just on the edge of hearing. "Did you hear that?" Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. We listened. A soft, dragging sound echoed down the corridor, like footsteps, but uneven, shuffling. Jake, always the brave one, led the way. We followed, hearts pounding, until we reached a door marked Ward C. The whispering grew louder, more distinct. Voices overlapping, filled with anguish. Jake pushed the door open. The room was bathed in darkness, save for the weak beams of our flashlights. Rusted bed frames lined the walls, their mattresses long decayed. Chains hung from the ceiling, remnants of an era when treatment meant confinement. And then we saw her. A figure standing at the far end of the room, her back to us. Long, matted hair obscured her face. She wore a tattered hospital gown, stained with something dark. We froze. "Hello?" Jake called out, his voice trembling despite himself. The figure didn't move. Jake stepped forward. The lights flickered. When they came back on, the figure was gone. Panic surged through us. We ran back into the hallway, but it had changed. The walls seemed to stretch, the doors multiplying. The building itself felt alive, shifting to trap us inside. We turned corners blindly, desperate to find the exit. That's when we found the operating room. Blood-stained soiled but unmistakable covered the floor. Surgical tools lay scattered, rusted with time. But the worst part was the table in the center. Someone was on it. A figure strapped down, motionless. As we approached, the figure's eyes snapped open milky white, unseen, yet staring directly at us. We screamed. We fled, our flashlights flickering wildly. Doors slammed shut behind us, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. They weren't just voices anymore. They were inside our heads, filling our minds with thoughts that weren't ours. We lost Jake somewhere along the way. One moment, he was right behind us. The next, he was gone. His screams echoed through the halls, then cut off abruptly. Lisa and I found ourselves back in the main hall, disoriented and terrified. The front doors were still there but now, chained shut from the inside. That's when we saw the figure again. Closer this time. Her face was wrung too wide, with a grin that stretched impossibly far. Her eyes were black voids, reflecting nothing. She moved toward us without walking, gliding over the ground. We ran. We found a stairwell and bolted down into the basement. The air grew colder with each step, the whispers deafening now. The basement was a maze of old storage rooms and crumbling walls. We found Jake there, or what was left of him. His body was twisted, contorted into an unnatural position, his face frozen in a silent scream. Something had written on the wall above him in dark, dripping letters. "Stay with us." Lisa broke. She collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably. I pulled her to her feet, dragging her through the labyrinth of the basement. We found a service tunnel, hidden behind a rusted door. It led us outside. But Lisa didn't make it. The whispers took her. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing in the field beyond the asylum. When I looked back, the building was dark and silent, as if nothing had happened. But the whispers never left me. They're with me now. And if you're reading this, they found you too. Additional details. Since that night, my life has been a fragile thread, frayed at the edges. My reflection doesn't always move when I do. Lights flicker when I'm near, and shadows linger longer than they should. I started seeing Jake and Listenon as they were, but as twisted echoes. They appear in mirrors, reflections that grin even when I don't. Their voices whisper at the edge of sleep, pulling me closer to something dark and endless. Last week, I found an old patient file on my doorstep, yellowed, brittle, marked with Ward C. Inside was a photograph of the woman from the asylum. Her eyes seemed to follow me. On the back of the photo was a message: "You never left." Now I'm not sure if I ever escaped at all,